Hi, my name is Glaze.
Hi, my name's Jazzy, and welcome to Let's Table That.
Today we had a very special guest. She's my friend, Samantha Crisp, and we talked about the logic of the people, bridging the gap between the human side and the mechanical side of HR. So stay tuned for that. Hi, Samantha.
Hi, Glaze. Hi, Jazzy.
Hello.
Thanks so much for being here today. Looks like you brought the spring weather with you, so we're super excited about that. Welcome to Let's Table That.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Samantha, please share with us what your background is for those that aren't aware of your background and how you started in HR. We would love to know.
All right. So my name's Sam. I'm currently the HR operations manager at TripStack, and I've worked in the tech space for about a decade now. And my career has taken some pivots over time. I actually started out my career in operations primarily, and then just happened to make a pivot over to HR, starting out in campus recruitment and then moving into a learning and development focused role, and then finally in HR operations where I am today.
And Sam, how did you end up in HR? What's that story?
Yeah, so honestly, I never expected to end up in an HR career, but it happened when I was working in operations at my first tech company. My VP at the time had a conversation with my manager, and just through his own observations, he felt like I was really well suited for HR. I think it's because during that time I was doing a lot of the interviewing for the operations department, supporting the campus recruitment, and I started building a lot of learning and development workshops for my specific team. So when he brought that up to my manager, she wholeheartedly agreed as well. And so she talked to me about it, asking if I'd ever consider it. And it seemed like the right time in my career to try something new. And it just so happened a role opened up on the HR team. And so I took the leap, and I've been working in HR ever since.
In terms of education, I saw you studied journalism.
Yes.
Have you picked that up at all, or not necessarily?
Not really. I think there's elements of journalism in a lot of the stuff that I do. Like, I think in HR, we're constantly doing investigations, seeking out the truth, a lot of storytelling. So I think I've carried a lot of those skills over into my current job. And I was telling Glaze earlier this week, I have done some writing on the side just to have a creative outlet for myself. But I never really took a career in the journalism field because I just realized it wasn't for me. But no regrets on that degree. I think it taught me a lot of amazing skills that I've carried forward in my career at every single job I've been at. So
yeah, I can see journalism relating to like recruitment and people ops and understanding that. On that, would you say that there's any like fake news that HR leaders continue to tell themselves that isn't actually true?
I would say probably the biggest fake news story that HR leaders tell themselves is that we can be 100% people first 100% of the time. I think many people that go into the field, myself included, we go into it wanting to be the ultimate advocate for employees, grant their every wish and really be there for the people. But it's obviously much more complicated than that. One thing I remember from earlier in my career, in my first HR leadership role, I had a conversation with this CEO I was working for at the time, and she made a comment that I needed to put my corporate hat on. And I remember hearing that comment, and at the time I felt resistant to it because it felt like going against the people first mission that brought me into the field in the first place. But it forced, I think, a very important perspective shift for me, where in order to be a strong HR leader, you have to balance advocating for the employees with also prioritizing the needs and the priorities of the business. So I think being an HR leader is really about not just making the employees happy that day, but making sure that they have a job to come back to tomorrow. So just finding that balance.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it's hard sometimes to not always be the friendly person that you want to be, especially when you build relationships with them over time.
Yeah.
To balance that it's a hard role, but once you get experience with it, it's easier.
Yeah, that's a great call out. I think just because, and I feel like that's why I've stayed on the talent acquisition side for so long, is because it's a hard job. Like being in HR, people look to you that are colleagues and they want to feel supported. They want to feel that you have their back. Like, hey, it's human resources. You're here to help me. What do you mean you're here to help the company as well? So I definitely do not envy your job having to go in and creating and ensuring that there's like that line between how much of a friend are you to the colleagues, and then how much are you able to ensure that you're enabling the business at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I struggled with that a lot when I first went into HR, and I questioned a lot, is this the right job for me? Because I feel like I'm a very empathetic person. So it can be really emotionally draining sometimes, especially when you want to do as much as you can for the people. But I think it's just helping them see that perspective shift as well. Like, you may not be happy with the answer today, but this is the strategy that we have as a business is people first in the long term.
HR ops is usually invisible until it breaks. What would you say is the first sign that a company's pipes are bursting?
So I would say the first sign is if your source of truth has multiple versions. So say HR has one headcount number, finance has another, the department heads have another. I think if you need 4 spreadsheets and an apology to answer a simple question, then your pipes are clearly bursting and you need to get in better control of your systems.
What would you say are one of the typical best practices in HR, but it's actually kind of a waste of people's time?
Yeah, great question. So some people may find this controversial, but in my opinion, I think reference checks are kind of a waste of time. And I'll explain why. So first of all, I think background checks are important, where you're actually validating the facts around someone's employment history, criminal background checks, education, things like that. But when it comes to reference checks, I find that it's always just a glowing review of the candidate, because obviously they're not going to give a reference that's going to say anything negative about them. So I really just feel like it provides a false sense of security, and it's not really telling you anything new that you didn't already learn during the interview process. So personally, I would cut that step and then just focus more on doing more of an in-depth behavioral interview, case study, looking for work examples, things like that, to try and get a more accurate picture of if that person is the candidate that you want to hire.
Yeah, I know Glaze agrees with that, with the reference versus background checks.
Oh, yeah, I agree. I definitely very much agree. It's like, oh, reference check, why? And you're totally correct. They aren't going to give us somebody that doesn't know their background well, or isn't going to be like, they're amazing. Yeah. Like, I'll do your reference check too.
Yeah,
like, I've never worked together. We've never worked together in a company. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's one of those what do you feel about backdoor reference checks?
What's that?
So it's when, let's say, a candidate decides to give you Sam as a reference check, but then the hiring manager's like, oh, I know so-and-so at the same company that you work at. Let me just do a reference check on the side. So that's without consent.
Yeah.
Right? And I feel like that's super slimy.
And they happen all the time.
It happens a lot, especially at the leadership side of it. And so, yes, would love to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I feel strongly about that as well. I think that it's unethical to be doing that. It's basing your hiring decision off of someone's subjective experience and opinion of a person, and you never know what they could have been going through at the time when they were working at that job, or how they've changed and evolved over time. So I think it's very unfair to the candidate, and yeah, I don't feel good about it. I never encourage that, or if someone gives me their unsolicited opinion based on what they've heard through someone else, I don't pay attention to that, because I just don't think that's fair to the candidate at all.
Have you ever had to deal with somebody that's done that at your company, and how did you coach them through that?
Yeah, so I have had to deal with that in the past. It's something that now I address through candidate and interview training with our hiring teams from the get-go, so that it isn't something that comes up in the future. But I have had to have conversations with it's always more senior leaders most of the time too, to be like, this isn't very ethical to be going about it this way.
I think one thing just on the background checks, just to be the devil's advocate.
Mhm.
I agree for the most part, like reference checks can just be a glowing profile
Mhm.
description. But I do think one question that could be worthwhile is asking that reference check person, like how to be a good manager for that individual,
Yes,
or like
I do
how
agree with
that
that.
person works well or how they don't work well. I think those questions would help to have that person thrive in your company. But
Mhm.
otherwise, if you're just going to ask questions of like, how were they at Microsoft? Like, it's kind of generic what the response you'll get.
Yes,
Mhm.
no, I completely agree with you. I think the only like value add that I've gotten from reading through reference checks in the past is like what is this person's motivators, what keeps them motivated at work, questions like
Mm,
that, because that is really important to
mm,
pass on to their new manager so they know how to keep them engaged and retain them as an
Mhm.
employee. But I also think you could uncover that in your first one-on-one with the new hire
for
anyways,
sure.
but it does give a good picture of that, which I think is helpful.
Yeah.
Mm.
So you've managed global teams. How do you handle cultural nuances without creating 20 different sets of practices or rules?
Mm.
So how I've tackled cultural nuances at my current company is I've created a ways of working training that I take all new hires through during the onboarding process. So what that looks like is it's more so shared principles that we follow as a team around like communication, collaboration, how we structure feedback, things like that. So that it's a culture that everyone can step into no matter where they're located in the world. And then I think it helps address like some of the cultural differences that people have when everyone kind of steps into those shared principles.
I love that. What do you call it? Sorry?
Ways of working.
Ways of working. Love that.
How do you present it or distribute it to the new employees?
So I do it through a live training session. So it's either in person if possible with me or virtual for our candidates that are based all over the world. And yeah, it's we cover in that our culture code, our key policies and principles, and then also those best practices for working with distributed teams, communication and collaboration.
Nice. Is that during their orientation week?
Yeah, so I always try and go through that with them during their first week on the job.
I think talent individuals have a lot of input as well within like orientation week and what can go in there. Because I know you have a talent background
Mhm.
and now you're in HR. So you would know like what would be important for new candidates to know about the company and what will drive retention at the end of the day.
Yes.
So that's a cool, I guess, aspect that you have to your role right now.
Yeah, and we always do onboarding feedback surveys to measure and check like, okay, what's missing in our onboarding
Mm.
program? And another onboarding program that I just rolled out at my current company is product training. Because I think that's really important, especially if you work in a complicated tech company,
Yeah.
just educating everyone on what all the different teams do, how everyone works together to meet our common goals. So, yeah, I'm constantly looking for new ways to improve the onboarding experience for employees and just help them feel more equipped in their role
I actually
in the first
really
few
like
months.
that product training. I don't think a lot of companies have that in orientation.
Mhm.
And
You're right.
it's right because I
Mhm.
know even agencies too, where it's like multiple clients, different portfolios.
Mhm.
It's sometimes hard to understand what your company does if you're in a role that doesn't touch the client facing side.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
that's so useful. I love that.
Mhm. I think it also helps to create like a holistic picture on how everybody integrates and how everybody works. And that way you
Mhm.
can really see how it all just kind of like trickles down like a domino effect. Like, how does my work impact
I was just
this
going to say,
person's work? And
yeah.
I love
Mhm.
seeing that. And sometimes if you're new, you're not going to be, oh, what is this? Like asking a million questions about what we do as a company because that sounds stupid. At the end of the day, it sounds like it would be a dumb question to ask. But
Yeah,
I do love that. I love that. The product training. You do love your training and your learning.
I do. Yeah. I do have an L&D background. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's something that's always been a passion for me.
Mhm.
I love that.
I'm actually getting into that more recently. I didn't think I would, not that I didn't think I would enjoy it. I just didn't see that bucket of HR as much before.
Mhm.
But yeah, I like it more and more now, like the facilitation and just like
Mhm.
building out useful modules or programs that are just going to like help your employees.
Mhm.
Mhm.
There
Yeah,
has
it
to be
really
an
helps with
appetite.
cross collaboration too, just getting
Mhm.
people together in a room to do
Yeah.
some training exercises. So, something that I always enjoy.
Yeah. Nice.
I think it's even better when there's an appetite for it, like in an
Mm-hmm.
organization, and you know that colleagues are asking for it. That's fun.
I know. You always hate facilitating something where you feel it's just going to go in the ear and out.
Yeah.
It's the worst.
And how do you build a high performance culture for people who aren't type A overachievers?
So that's a great question. I think especially in the tech space, a lot of us fall into that hustle culture trap where intensity equals impact. But I actually don't think that you need a team full of type A overachievers to have a high performing team. I think it's really important to actually have a mix of personalities on your team. And I tend to find that the type B people that have better work-life boundaries, they tend to be more consistent performers because they're not the ones that are getting burnt out and then having to take leave or quit or, So I think it's important to have a mix of both and then just make sure that expectations are clear across the board. I think anyone can be successful as long as they know what success and winning looks like in their role. And having that clarity will help them reach their full potential. So I think it really just comes down to clear expectations.
Got it. And do you think that a calm in quotations, calm company would have a lower ceiling for success versus a company that has a hustle culture?
It's hard to say. I think definitely you move a lot faster. You produce a lot more when you have more of that hustle culture. But I do think it's important to have work-life boundaries. Give people that time away from work so that they can bring their best self to work and perform at their best. So I think that it's kind of has to fall a little bit in the middle. Like, of course, there's going to be days where you have to put in extra hours and certain things happen where you have to have all hands on deck. But I don't think it should be consistent overworking all the time. I think that's just going to burn out your team and create a toxic work environment.
I agree. In terms of HR data, do you find yourself using it often? Do you find it's actually useful?
Yeah, I think HR data and just any data in general is only as useful as the story that it tells. So, of course, if you're in a boardroom meeting or something, or you're meeting with executives and you give them a number, like our turnover is 12%, it's probably not going to mean much to them.
Correct.
It's not going to, create a conversation. But if you say our turnover is at 12%, but 80% is from people within their first 90 days at the company, and it's all happening in this specific department. Now you've given leadership a roadmap of what needs to be fixed. So I think as long as you can tell a story with that data, it's very useful.
I feel a lot of people don't always embrace the storytelling part of reading data. Like numbers can only go so far, like you're saying. So yeah, I think sometimes I was just wondering your perspective on that, because I know in certain areas of work, data is very highly used. And then sometimes people have a misconception that HR data isn't as, I guess, useful depending on how it's told. So I agree, though. It's how you storytell it.
Yeah, I think it's a really good skill for everyone to learn is how to be a better storyteller with the facts and the data that you're presenting.
So we've talked a lot about orientation just now, newcomers to the company. But in terms of fixing broken things, for example, what is one global tech stack that's been broken in a certain area that you've had to fix?
So I've had the pleasure of working at a lot of small to medium companies that I've come in and found that all of the employee data is managed through spreadsheets, which is obviously a jump scare, but it's surprising how many companies actually operate solely off of spreadsheets. So I've more than once had to migrate all of that data into an HRIS. So I think that process can be a little messy, especially when there's multiple sources of truth, like I mentioned before, and just making sure that you're cleaning up all of that data first before putting it into the HRIS. But I think it's a very important step, especially when you're scaling, to make sure that you're moving all of that into a proper HRIS tool to maintain that data integrity over time.
Definitely. What would you say are some top HRIS tools that you've liked working with, if you want to share?
I feel like I always don't love any of the ones that I've tried before. I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done on HRIS tools. But I think when it comes down to choosing the right one. It's all about integrations. So which tool is going to integrate best with the other tools you have around payroll and performance management, different things like that. Whatever else you have in your tech stack, find the tool that's going to be able to seamlessly integrate with those. I think that's the best approach because honestly, they all have their pros and cons. I haven't found the ultimate HRIS system yet.
Yeah.
But
I think my favorite are the internally built ones. Like you see maybe two tools that you like, put them together, have your developers make them.
And you sometimes we just need to get the developers on it. They can do a better job.
Literally. And you save money too.
Yeah. I think ATS too, like there's so many ATSs that I've touched, and it's like there's only one. I don't know if I can mention it right now, but there's only one that I love, and that one's custom, like internally built just for that company. And I'm like,
wow.
Every time I was in that tool, I was like, I will never ever work in this tool again after I work at this company.
Yeah, I got to savor every moment.
Yeah. I was like, oh, I love this. I love what it's doing right now. And then while we're talking about tools, you love L&D, learning and development. I found in my experience, I haven't come across a great L&D tool that really helps colleagues that you can maintain at the same time, adding in things. You always need developers or like UX designers to like really build it out, and it takes forever. So have you come across a tool that you like for L&D or for training in general?
I would say like right now we're using Sauna Labs. It seems to be good so far, but it's very new, so I haven't really formed an opinion on it yet. But I think for me, I create a lot of my training content just in-house and then build it into those tools. But there's a lot of different options coming out now. And then in terms of just external training, we use Udemy at my current company, and they just rolled out this new AI role-playing feature that I think is pretty cool.
That's so cool.
And where people can actually role-play different scenarios, which I think can be very helpful. And then they also have skills assessments in there. And I feel like this is now an ad for Udemy. But
It's okay. Did you have to build it from scratch?
No, that's it. That's one that we pay for externally. Yeah.
So on the topic of training, why does manager training usually fail to actually change manager behavior?
Great question. So I think manager training often fails if you're treating it as a one-off workshop as opposed to a muscle that you're continuously building and integrating into your culture. So if, you put your leaders through a 60-minute workshop and expect them to all be excellent people managers, that's not really going to be the case. I think you have to give them continuous support and opportunities to practice. So one of the companies I worked at earlier in my career, we would do this workshop. I think it was once a month, and it was called ISI, which stands for Iron Sharpens Iron. And I think that's like a biblical term. I don't know who came up with that. But anyways, we'd get together like once a month, and we would just have like different case study scenarios based on kind of real life things that could happen on the job. And we would be in little groups, and we'd spend some time figuring out, okay, how do we want to approach this situation? How would we communicate? And then we'd like present back to everyone else in the group, and there'd be senior leaders in there reviewing and giving us feedback on our approach. And I think that was really helpful for me earlier in my career to be able to pressure test different things and be able to fail in a safe environment before actually experiencing those situations in real life. And I do think there's a lot that you can learn from your peers based on their own experiences and things that have worked and not worked for them. So I think just making sure you're baking in that time to have people practice with one another. And then also, of course, just building those leadership behaviors and best practices into your ways of working and into your day-to-day culture to make sure that it's at the top of everyone's mind all the time.
That's great. If you were to choose one workshop that hits on something on, being a better manager, what would that specific area be?
I think the biggest one is having effective one-on-ones and just being able to deliver helpful feedback. I think that's the biggest struggle for a lot of managers, especially early in their career, is being able to give constructive feedback without feeling bad about it or with, approaching it in the wrong way. So I think being able to understand and use a framework for providing feedback, like one framework I really like and always share with my teams is situation, behavior, impact. I think having a way to explain feedback in that way makes it feel less personal. You're just stating the facts and what you observed and what the impact was, so people can actually understand why they're getting this constructive feedback. And then also teaching people a framework for receiving feedback. So for that, I like using the COA framework, which is clarity, ownership, action. So making sure they understand the feedback, they take ownership of it if they agree with it. And then, okay, what's the action I'm going to take going forward? How am I going to do things differently next time? So they also hold themselves accountable to improving.
I like that. We got some abbreviations.
Yes, I was going to say, what do you call that? She's giving out a lot of, abbreviations?
Abbreviations.
Okay. My brain. I love that.
So in terms of working either with founders or executives, what would you say is, I guess, some truths about the people function that they don't want to hear or that they might not like to hear?
So I wouldn't say this is the case for all founders, but some founders, I think they need to hear the truth that your culture isn't what you preach, it's what you tolerate. So you can have the most inspiring set of cultural values and preach it to every single person coming into the company. But if your leaders and the people at your company aren't modeling those values, it means nothing. And also, if I think you're tolerating bad behavior from someone that maybe is bringing in a lot of revenue for the company, but you're tolerating that because of the business, I think that is actually your culture, right? You're putting that over the general happiness of everyone else. So I think that's a hard truth for founders to hear, but it's important.
Yeah, I like that. Tolerating is such a good way to put it.
Yeah. I feel like also the word culture can feel super fluff now with founders. And it's just one of those reasons why having somebody in HR, even at the early stages of your company, is super important. To be able to manage that, especially when you know you're going to be scaling and you're going to be bringing in a ton of people that are going to be different and that are going to come from diverse backgrounds. That will change your culture a lot. So I love that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's hard for anybody to understand that when you're scaling, that culture will be maintained. Like, of course, they're just worried about like the margins and the business and the product market fit or whatever the product or services. So I understand how it's maybe not top of mind to them, but I so agree that that's why you just need either a fractional person or a full-time person to just help remind them why you need certain things in place and also to help maintain that once you scale.
Yeah, 100% agree.
So if you had to write the unauthorized biography of HR today, what would the first chapter be titled, since you're in journalism and you love writing?
We're putting your journalism to test right
Yes.
now.
So I would probably call it the corporate hat, just tying back to what I said in the beginning about balancing the needs of the employees with the needs of the business. I think at the end of the day, as HR leaders, we can't always control the final decision, but we can make sure that there's dignity, transparency, and logic in the process.
And what would you say would be the last chapter title of that?
Retirement. I don't know. What would you guys title it? I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Are we talking our own
Yeah, maybe
autobiography,
your
or
autobiography about talent acquisition, since that's more so your space.
I would call mine nostalgia.
Why?
Because when I first started in HR, or I guess recruiting, there was no Google. There was no LinkedIn.
Scary.
I know we had paper resumes, And
Right.
yeah.
Wow. Going door to door and handing them in.
Yes, ma'am.
That's crazy.
And I think so that would probably be my first one, just because the title to say nostalgia is because that's how I feel these days. Is I would love to go back
To the
to the beginning, because it just, even though now you have all these fun tools, AI, the world of work has changed so much after COVID, especially after COVID and after all of the tech companies. Everyone's doing amazing. It just feels like I'd love to just be able to go back and it just feels simpler.
Simpler times.
Yeah.
I feel that.
Yeah. Yeah. So that would be mine.
Love it.
I think mine would be like diving in the deep end, because
Oh, you're going all the way there.
Wait, what? What do you mean?
No, I'm just saying.
Oh, okay. Because I did not think I was going to get into talent acquisition. Like, I studied psychology and I thought I was going to be, I don't know, something in neuro or I really wanted to also be like a psychotherapist. But back to what you were saying, I knew I would not be able to handle like people's issues or their emotions. Like, I would get way too wrapped up into it. I'm so empathetic. But anyways, back to the title. So I think I would do it. I mean, I labeled it that because I didn't think I was going to get into it. And then when I landed that role, I was just like, okay, I'm out of uni. I need a job. And then I just totally taught myself everything. It was like a startup bootstrapped. The founder was like running with her head off, literally. So I just taught myself everything. And then I was like, oh, I actually like this. I'm going to stay in this.
Yeah.
And,
I do like the thrill of working on teams where there's not much built.
The chaos is fun.
I do like the chaos.
Especially when you can control it and organize it.
Yeah.
Because then you can also directly see how impactful you are once you start building in some structure as well. But there is a thrill to the chaos. I completely agree with that.
It's something that I think most people like to hear. It's like, what problems am I solving? What am I getting when I'm getting into the organization? Oh, wow.
The chaos is good when you have people that are
loving
good
the
people,
chaos as much.
And just good people. Like, you don't want that person breathing down your neck, like making the chaos more stressful.
Yeah.
Like when
people that can handle the chaos well.
Yeah.
People that can handle the chaos well, but also work well with other people. You don't want to be a difficult person to work with. There's nothing worse than.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah. Being easy to work with is such an underrated skill. It's so important.
Literally.
It really is.
I was talking about this with my boyfriend yesterday, and he's in product. And so I was just asking him, like, basically what parts of his role are like administrative and like how he works with tech people. And the one thing he just kept saying is it's obviously admirable to work with a very intelligent person and for them to build on your ideas or even bring stuff that you're not thinking about. But just having somebody that's easygoing and can match your energy as well, like in those meetings, it's such a huge difference. And I know there's a huge, what's it called? I guess stereotype that really technical people are sometimes not as emotionally strong. And so he's just saying like those two attributes in a person are so good for a good relationship.
Yeah, 100%. So underrated.
Do you want to introduce Under the Table?
Oh, you were done. Okay.
Oh, here we go.
So this is our Under the Table segment.
Okay.
And it's basically a set of questions that, I don't know, they're a little bit more flavorful.
Spicy.
Yeah. A little more flavorful.
I hope it lives to the hype, though. We can make it a little bit more spicy, but it's not spicy.
Yeah. There's some that are a little bit more spicy than others. So yeah, if you can pick one up. If you don't like it, choose another one. Okay. We've got some.
Okay, here we go. Okay, first question. What's one truth about work or leadership that everyone knows but no one says out loud? Well, about leadership, I think, especially people leadership, you have to really love it and want to do it. I think a lot of people go into people leadership just to climb the ladder, and then they get into it and realize this isn't for me. I think there's a lot of people that are well suited to stay on the IC track. So I think that's really important to test for as you are promoting people as well, and like making sure that they actually want it too, not just you want it for them.
I completely agree with that. I feel like that's been a topic for us as well lately.
Yeah. That's not spicy enough. Make it more spicy.
Let me my emotional think about this one.
Could also choose another one if
Yeah,
that's
maybe
not.
I'll come back to that.
That one's a little.
See if I can think of anything
Yeah.
juicier. Next question. What's a workplace perk or nice to have that people pretend to love but secretly roll their eyes at? I think this one depends on the team.
Okay.
I think some teams, if they don't have a close-knit team, they don't care much for the team, company, after-hour events.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say the same for the company that I'm at. I think we all genuinely love getting together and spending a lot of time together. So it really depends on the company. But I've heard countless times from people being like, just give me the money on my paycheck. Like, I don't want to go to this escape room or whatever it may be, right? So
Yeah, like the team event, like
Yeah.
the team group thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that. And I think a lot of the times people will look at the money spent to host that, and it's like, why couldn't I just get that 5K?
yeah,
merit
like give me a
bonus.
bonus instead, or
Yeah.
throwing elaborate, crazy Christmas or holiday parties.
Yeah.
And then people look at how much money was spent on it.
Yeah.
Or they assume how much money was spent on it. And then they
Mhm.
say, couldn't you have just given us all a Christmas bonus instead?
Yeah.
So yeah, stuff like that for sure. You get feedback on that a lot.
Yeah.
And I'll just be thinking about work, to be honest, while we're on
Yeah.
that team event.
Yeah, I've had people at team events before like pull out their laptop to like deal with an incident. And I'm
Yeah.
like, guys, it's supposed to be fun.
Yeah.
I appreciate how dedicated they are.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Well, Sam, thank you so much.
Oh,
I was ready for the next one. No, it's okay.
I want to say thank you. You brought such nice facts, I think, to the show that we haven't touched on yet.
Abbreviations.
Yes.
We'll remember those. I
Yes.
love it.
And you had such a great energy. So thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you guys for being amazing hosts. It was great spending the afternoon with you. And now we can all go enjoy the warm weather while
I
it
know.
lasts.
Thanks, Sam.